I remember getting sucked down, just sucked down, and it was like a dirt hole. And I just flew down this hole, and instantly I heard screams, like women's screams and cries, and there's mist and heating mist coming up, and I'm completely chained. I'm chained by all fours, my wrist and my ankles, and I'm hung up, like strung up in between a room. It's a pure white room, and it's like me talking to this camera right now. I'm there.
All right, Brother Dylan, let's hear that testimony, bro.
Yeah, I'll start with the root of it. 11, 12 years old, my parents decided to get divorced. My mom, I'm sitting down at the kitchen table, she's washing dishes and tells me and your dad are getting separated. At 11 years old, it's really something hard to hear. You understand things your whole life. You've been with your parents. They've been together. Had a pretty good childhood, I'd say. And so by the time I was 12, 13 years old, my dad had moved out. He had an apartment. That was really hard, sitting down with them as we moved in, and he didn't even have a table yet, and we were kind of sitting on the floor of his living room kitchen, and them just being like, well, this is it. We ordered pizza, and it's like, well, this is how it is. And I was starting to get interested into smoking pot. That's how it really started. I wanted to smoke pot. I had drank throughout my life. I've had a few beers. First time I got drunk was probably around 12, 13 years old. I remember my mom went to a gathering, probably with her sisters, and had a friend over. She wasn't a drinker. She had a bottle of Malibu that was given to her by one of her family members, probably. That's besides the point. But me and my buddy decided, well, we were going to drink this bottle of booze, and it started from there. That was the first time I ever had a mind-altering substance, was alcohol. We drank the whole bottle. We partied. We're shooting fireworks off in the front yard, had a bonfire. Loved it. I loved being altered. I loved that feeling. It took away all of my anxieties and fears and sadness. The last year of middle school, 8th grade, just about the end of the year, I wanted to try some pot. I had been watching people on YouTube smoking pot, and I asked this kid that I knew that smoked weed. I said, "Hey man, I wanna get high," and he offered me some weed for like $20 for like a gram. I didn't have $20 when I was 12, 13 years old, probably 13. And I got some cigarettes from him. And I remember smoking a couple cigarettes first time, never inhaled. And I remember the third time I smoked a cigarette, I had swallowed some spit while the smoke was in my mouth, and it burnt my virgin lungs. I was hacking up, and I was out in my backyard while my mom was still at work. I didn't really like it, hurt, but I liked the buzz I got from it, so I smoked one the next day, and I started with this real small, I remember just taking a real small inhale and just getting that buzz, and I really digged it. And so I started smoking when I was 14 years old. I didn't quit till I was 23. I really quit like cold turkey when I was like 20, but I was on and off. I kind of picked it back up when I was 23 again, when I started really partying and drinking again. And I would smoke once in a while, but that's besides the point. So I started drinking once in a while. I remember it was the last day of school of 8th grade, and we were walking home, me and a buddy, and one of these kids that, had smoked pot saw us. He was doing school, filling out paperwork for freshman year of high school. We were walking by the high school. I lived 2 blocks from it. And he ran out and saw us, and he was like, "Hey, I'm going to come hang out with you guys." So he said, "Well, we're walking to my house." And he goes, "Well, I got some pot. You guys want to smoke?" It's like, I've always wanted to smoke pot. And we go back to my house, and he packs a bowl. I knew how to inhale at this time because I'm smoking cigarettes. And the first time we smoked, I didn't get high. I pretend to be high. Started my freshman year of school. Met some people that were smoking pot already. I fell into that crowd. It was maybe the first week of high school, maybe a little earlier. someone offered me to smoke again, the same kid, and same deal. We went back to my house, smoked, nothing happened again. And me and the other friend was there, and he didn't get high either. That was both of our second time smoking. We didn't get high. And we were kind of troublemakers. We were messing around in the neighborhoods and stuff and doing that kind of stuff. Never nothing gang related or nothing real bad, just being, hooligans. And I remember my dad he didn't even smoke pot. It was the craziest thing, but I just had this feeling, like this urge to search his house for weed. And I opened one of these cookie jars, like sugar jars. He had these 3 glass jars, and I opened one. And there was a bag of weed in there, probably like 4 grams. And I remember taking like some out and probably a dime, and I put it in a bag. I take it home. We're at my mom's house the week later, and she was working all the time to keep the house. She really wanted to keep the house for us kids. And that was the first time I got high. She left for work, and me and my buddy made a little homemade pipe out of a toilet paper roll and tin foil. We smoked, and we got super high. I'm pretty sure it was laced. And I remember just walking out on the streets and seeing shadows of like Civil War soldiers and just being freaked out and paranoid. But when we first smoked it, I loved it. I remember just laughing and I instantly fell in love with weed, instantly. From there, I was gung-ho. I wanted to smoke pot. I was searching for pot all the time. Any money I got, anytime I went to the gas station to get some food that my mom gave me for snacks, I would keep the change. And I met a gal in my freshman year, and she sold me weed. And that was where the journey started. I did good in school until then. When my parents got divorced, I stopped focusing on school, started getting Fs. I started showing up to school high, and I could not focus. I was failing all my classes. Started hanging around the wrong crowd. I met a guy when I first got my first job when I was 15, and he was a couple years older than me. I didn't realize till years later that he was a meth addict, that he shot meth. He had been in the whole criminal environment pretty much his whole life. He knew everything about selling drugs to robbing people to any criminal activity you can basically imagine. This guy was an expert in. And he was a career criminal, you could say, but a white trash one, he wasn't very good at it. And we got in a lot of trouble, but he came to my first day of sophomore year of high school. I had already been smoking pot. I saw him in the parking lot. He moved, and he was now going to high school with me. We instantly clicked like that. He started introducing me to harder drugs. I remember the first time was Adderall, and we were in my car. It was probably on lunch. Opened up the pill, crushed some beads. I remember the feeling of anxiety, but I wanted to try a new drug and I wanted to be cool. I remember he chopped up 2 lines, he crushed the beads down with a credit card, and we snorted 2 lines, 1 each. And I just remember that feeling of that adrenaline feeling, that power, that strength, just the pure upness of it, the endorphin rush, and loving it. That was my first time having an upper. I was a poly drug user after that. I used every drug under the sunset. The only thing I haven't used is Flocka, heroin, and fentanyl, to my knowledge. Basically every opioid pill you can think of, I've done. Ritalin, Adderall. I later got into methamphetamine in my junior year. Smoked pot the whole time and drank like a fish. I drank almost every single night. I was drinking. My dad was an alcoholic. I got kicked out of my mom's house. I was in and out of JDC. We basically just used and abused each other. We would just get high every day. We would skip school. I eventually had so many truancies and that I had to go to school, or I was going to go back to JDC. I would just show up with no bag. I remember I would actually come to school with one of those glass tea bottles filled with brandy and just be drunk all day. I'd drink it by my 3rd hour. And I remember trying acid for the first time in my junior year, and I loved psychedelics immediately, but it was hard to get acid, so that kind of flew off. I remember the first time I did meth, I had already done Adderall and Ritalin. I was snorting it at this time, and I found out later about my junior year that my friend was a meth head, and he was using methamphetamine. He was actually an IV user. He was shooting meth, and I remember him telling me, like, I don't want to ever catch you using meth, he just told me like it wouldn't be good if I caught you using meth. You know, you won't want me to catch. Don't use this stuff. You get hooked on it and you'll never get free. And he had been using since he was like 12. And I remember one night I kind of was selling drugs in my high school and I was just partying a lot. In that scene, when you're using drugs and drinking, it's a rough scene because everyone uses each other. They call you a friend and you call them a friend, but the only real reason they're friends is because they can get you high and you can get them high. In one way or another, there's a use in between the lines. Nobody's a real true friend. And I remember they hit me up in the middle of the night and said, hey, we got kicked out of this party. Cops busted. Can we come over? It was two gals and her boy, one of their gals' boyfriends said, yeah, come on over. They came over. I remember smoking a cigarette. I'm waiting out on my porch. And the first things they said when they came up was, hey, we got some methamphetamine. I remember they said it just like that. It kind of set me back because I had a little bit of interest in using meth, but I had been around him, my best friend, and some of his friends when they were using meth. I never seen them use it, but I've seen them high and it scared me. The looks in their eyes, their face, they would just freak me out. They're super intense and their cheeks were sucked in and they're always just they're very intimidating and their eye pupils would just be huge and they were just sketchy people. And I saw him on it and he was very intense and angry when he was on it. And so I was kind of interested in using it myself. Like I said, the reason I was using drugs, and as I look back on it, I was just trying to escape. I mean, there wasn't one day that went by that I wasn't using some kind of substance, and mainly it was booze and pills and marijuana. And when I could get my hands on amphetamines such as Adderall and Ritalin, I was using them. But it was easy to get pills because I had a couple friends that their mom and their grandma used it. And I just wanted to disappear. I didn't want to have this normal state of mind. I wanted to be intoxicated in whatever way it took. So I remember, I had rap sheets on my probation. I had rap sheets from being in on JDC, and every weekend when I was living with my dad because I got kicked out of my mom's house, the cops were there because me and my dad would get drunk. We'd get drunk together, and it always ended in a fight. And so this night goes by, and they're like, "We want to sell this meth." And I want to use it though. And so finally I'm just like pretending to hit up people and I'm like, hours go by, I can't find anyone. I was out of any drugs. I didn't have any weed. There was some beer in my fridge, but I had to wait till my dad left for work to drink it. He was a trucker. And so I'm like, let's try some of this. Let's snort it. And they're like, no. While more goes on, sure, you do it though first. So I remember I took my cellophane from my cigarette packet, crushed it down with my lighter, and I took a small little bump. And I remember it just hurt so bad. You're snorting glass. But I remember just the feeling was like, oh man, I was in love with it because I was so up, like just instantly like filled with power. Just the endorphin rush. And yeah, my dad ended up finding out I was just being crazy, flailing around the room. He wakes up, opens the door. All of us are in there. He kicks us out. I leave with him because I wanted to keep the meth. I wanted to do more. And as soon as he left, I went behind the house. The door was locked. I ripped my screen out. I opened the door. We partied all night. My mom came over there in the morning because my dad called her and she caught us. They got sent home. I kept the meth in my pocket and they walked away. It was spring break. The whole weekend I did meth. I was up for that whole weekend. I was up probably 5 days. I remember I started hearing voices and seeing shadow people. This was the first time I had demonic encounters with shadow people. I remember being in the mall and just everywhere I was, there were shadow people everywhere. I remember being in Spencer's and it's a dark place and you could just see in your peripheral vision just shadow people everywhere. You look over and there's nobody there. And you can't sleep. And I just kept doing bumps. I had it in a mechanical pencil that was broke. I had the baggie wrapped up, threw it in there. I had a little piece that I broke off the end of the mechanical pencil that had a sharp end. And I'd just take little itty bitty bumps, just minuscule, and I'd sit and do bumps every few hours. I had a whole gram of it, and that lasted me all spring break. I remember like the 5th night, I was trying to sleep during the day. It was so sad. I couldn't sleep, and I hadn't eaten the whole time for like 5 days, nothing but water. And I was so hungry, but I couldn't eat. When you do methamphetamine, it's poison. It's like chemical and acids and stuff. And it burns out your nostrils and your throat, especially when you smoke it. I wasn't smoking at this time, but when you go to eat, it hurts your mouth because your whole mouth is chemical burned. And I remember I couldn't eat anything and I couldn't swallow it because my stomach was so just sour. I remember I was like eating like half a cracker every few minutes and had some water. And then I was trying to sleep and I had it under my pillow and I kept just pulling it out and doing bumps. I remember hearing my dad's voice screaming my name. I remember going in the kitchen and he just yelling like, "What do you want?" And he's not even in there. These were my first encounters with like something else that wasn't there. Your mind's going crazy. Well, I get in trouble. A couple days after my 17th birthday, I took a handful of Klonopin, blacked out, got in a fight with my dad, strangled him, woke up in jail, had no idea. It was a Friday evening, woke up on Sunday, had no idea what day it was, how long, why I was in there. I got out and was already on probation for an assault and battery as an underager. So I went straight over to JDC. I had court coming up. I was facing a felony. By God's grace, I got out of it. I was on probation for about 1.5 years. I was on an ankle monitor for a few months. They made me choose between going to Fort McCoy Challenge Academy for 6 months or doing a 600-hour term over at Western Dairyland. And I was dating a gal. I didn't want to leave her. And I stayed in Eau Claire and went to Western Dairyland and did a construction program. I stayed sober because they drug tested at Western Dairyland until the very end. I got off of probation a year or so later, whenever it was. I got off probation. I think it was a little over a year. And I got off and I had just finished the program. And it was the first time they made an exception for me. I had done such a well job there that they actually enrolled me in for another, you could do 900 hours max. They enrolled me for another 300 hour. And the gal that I was dating at the time, I met her when I was 16 and dated her till I was about 20 years old. But she was also a meth user most of her life. And she got back into meth and I was sober at the time from it. You know, I got sober after probably about a year after that spring break. I'd do it once in a while and no, I take that back. I got completely sober after that spring break because I couldn't get it. When I picked it back up, I remember I was off probation. I started smoking pot again because I was off probation, but I was still working at Western Dairyland, so I was scared to get drug tested, even though I won't go to jail if something happened. So I started smoking pot, and I remember we're at like a fleet store, like a Goodwill type store, and my girlfriend's like she's kind of like flailing around and stuff. And I was like, "Look, if you got some meth, you better share it." And she's like, "Okay, let's go back to my foster mom's house. I got some dope." So we go back and that was the first time I smoked meth. She had a light bulb with a little pen in it. And I remember she, you know, I'm not going to explain exactly how you smoke meth, but basically she cooks it down and rolls in. And I hold it and twist the light bulb while she lights it. And immediately when I inhaled that meth smoke, it was so much more powerful than just snorting it. It was such a more, I remember like all the hairs on my head like stood up. I could like feel every single one of them. And I wanted more. That was the last for meth. And I said, "Let's hit up your dealer. Let's go get some more." We went and bought a 1/4 gram, 2 points that night. And we went and we smoked, it was like 0.25. You buy it by the points, not by the gram. And we went and we smoked it all. That's a lot of meth to smoke, especially your first time. I remember being so high, man. I was up for like 2 days. You know, smoking meth, you're literally smoking poison. I remember I couldn't walk up my staircase the next day because every step took so much breath out of my lungs. But I was up all night just flailing. But that started it right over again. I had $5,000 saved up. I spent it all in a couple months. And I got fired from my job. I got caught by a cop with an ounce of weed. I got a ticket. They fired me from the job. Started working fast food. Went in and out of sobriety from there. Got a job for 1.5 years, couldn't use. Ended up getting out of there. Went to another job, left there after about a week. At this point, you know, earlier when we got out of high school, we were living with my girlfriend's grandma at the time. That's now my ex, but we're living with her grandma, and we were just smoking a lot of weed at that time. That's when I was working fast food. We smoked meth for a little bit, and we both got clean off the meth and thought I was doing good just because I was just smoking weed, even though I was smoking like an ounce every week. We we moved out to our place that we had in an apartment. And this is when I was kind of free. I was working a job where we were making just enough money to afford rent and to have fun. And we had a dealer out there where we lived, and we started buying acid from her. Got into acid. I was off the amphetamine, so I thought I was cool, man. I thought it was all good. I was trying to quit smoking cigarettes. I had a problem with that since I was 14. Then I'm about 20 years old. I had a little stint with acid for a little bit. Not big. I always stuck with the weed. I always just was a huge pothead. Even though I never get anything done when I was doing it. And it made me just not focus in school. It gave me paranoia. When I was doing meth, it gave me mad paranoia. And it always was a detriment to me. And I just tricked myself. I remember always saying, like, my dad was always say, like, when you getting off that stuff? And I'd be like, bro, I ain't never quitting this stuff. Like, this is me, man. This is what I'm always going to do my whole life. I really thought that. And I ended up leaving this gal after about 4 years with her. I'm living at my place alone. I quit and work at Johnson Monument. That's when I first met a Christian who's my friend today. And he just spread the gospel to me every day. And at that time, I was only smoking weed a little bit and drinking a little bit. And I really, really kind of wanted to find God. Everyone thought he was crazy at my work. I ended up quitting that job we worked there for 6 months maybe. And I just left one day. And I was scared of my life because this friend of mine now, I'm such a good friend with him. And I'm so thankful that he was just kept giving me the word of God, even though I didn't really want it. And he saw something in me that I didn't see. And I kind of left him. I didn't have his phone number and I left him. I remember as he was driving away, I had this discernment, I should stop and pull over and talk to him and get his number. But something made me flee and I fled, and I never got his number. And I started the new job where I'm at now. I started when I've been there for over a year. Probably almost 2 years now. I was 22 when I started, and I was pretty much sober. I didn't buy weed, but I was smoking weed with friends once in a while, and I was drinking once in a while. But I wasn't smoking pot nearly what I was. It was on the weekends, sometimes during the week, never at work. And I remember I met a guy there, and he was a weed dealer. I remember buying my first an ounce again. It wasn't my first ounce, but an ounce again. And I got right back into it. I was like, why did I ever stop doing this? And months go by. He's like, do you do mushrooms? And I was like, well, I used to do psychedelics, man. Oh, yeah. So I start using mushrooms with this guy, not with him, buying mushrooms. And I remember I loved it. I love the nature and I love camping. I remember just always going out in the woods every week. And I do a couple grams and I felt so engulfed in nature and with my spirit. I felt like the first time I was understanding myself. I remember I started journaling, my trip journals. I felt like I finally found myself. I was one with myself and at peace, and I started getting a sense of what this life is. I thought I was getting a sense of what this was and what I was meant to be. And I thought I was finding myself. I was meditating and doing yoga and a lot of new age stuff. And I thought I was building myself up. I thought I was becoming a better person. I was healing in some way. I was facing these things and my traumas and moving to a new leaf, even though I'm using drugs and partying. And I started going out with guys, the wrong crowd. We would go out to party at the college bars, and I would do mushrooms at the college bars. At this point, months and months have gone by. I start buying large quantities of mushrooms, a quarter pound at a time, about 112 grams. And I'm selling ounces to my friends. I don't sell any less than an ounce at this point. And I got jars under my bed of mushrooms, mason jars. And I just to preface, the biggest dose I ever did was 18 grams of mushrooms, and I was still under control. Like, I still could control my actions, and I didn't freak out, and I was out in the woods and talking to people. And don't get me wrong, I was, very high, and, the tracers and everything was colorful, and the whole world was breathing. I just remember skipping a rock across a stream, and the whole stream just turned to ripples, like purple and pink and orange. And so I meet two of these guys I work with. To make a long story short, I meet these two cats that I work with, and I'm partying with one of them, going out and drinking at the bars, and the other one was underage. And one day I'm like, hey, you guys want to try some mushrooms? They'd never done it before. Like, yeah, so we do a 1 gram trip. It's a really low dose. It's like a beginner dose just to welcome them into it. And they're like, we really like this. They had a lot of fun. So a couple weeks go by, I'm like, let's do it again. And we're at my house. And at this point in my journey, I have used every drug under the sunset, basically opioids, uppers, downers, a lot of acid, and a boatload of mushrooms. I've had like over 100, maybe even 200 trips under my belt of all different variations of dosages under different circumstances. I've been to raves, huge raves in Chicago under 3 grams of mushrooms, and held my focus while I was doing ecstasy and smoking weed. And I remember one rave, I took 3 tabs of acid. Like, I took 2 when I got there, and it wasn't enough, so I went to porta potty and took a 3rd one. And I just remember this big hillside was just melting. So that's to kind of preface the level that I was able to trip and use these drugs. I was like almost mastering these drugs. I loved them. I knew every emotion. I knew how to control my anxieties and overcome that like icky feeling. And so anyways, I remember we do this, and we're about an hour and a half in, and for me, I would fast when I do mushrooms, and they kick in real fast. And so I'm already at my peak. I've been at my peak for about a half hour now. I remember me and my friend are sitting right next to each other. There's one on each side. I'm in the middle. And this was the first time this ever happened, but I got stuck. I was just sitting there, and I got stuck. And I remember there was a glass of orange juice like on the end table, and this is how I knew I was stuck, because I wanted to get up and grab the orange juice, but I couldn't. And I've never had this before. And I remember looking over, and there was this weird, like, I was very introspective. I started having like these introspective thoughts of secular world. Like, I had started having these. It came to me when I was looking over at my 2 friends, and they both had at this point I had quit smoking. And I never really got into the vaping thing. I never really understood. I remember they were vaping, like they're just sitting there vaping, and I knew both of them wanted to quit. And I remember seeing them like vaping and realizing like, dude, cigarettes are really bad for you, but these dudes are like, what is like it came to? Like, they've tricked us. Like, we smoke all the time now. Like, you're at work. I'm sure anyone who's listening to this like has seen it. If you're at work or at school, like there's someone like inside like smoking, like you see them just smoking, and like you're doing it all the time. It's like you're so addicted you can't go an hour without it. And I remember they're on their phones on social media, and we had a movie on TV, and like looking over, and they were like swiping through social media. And it was all the secular, like, wicked ways of the world. It was like pornography and half-naked women and in fights. All it was just people fighting and shootings and gore. And I remember them just like one of the guys like showing me like all this stuff. Like, look at this car. Like, I want this car so bad. Like, they were just coveting like these things. They wanted them so bad. And I started having like these like secular like visions in my head, like something was like circling through. I remember the first vision I saw was like those nicotine commercials where it's like stop smoking, and it's pure orange with like the white dots for tobacco or nicotine or whatever. And like seeing that, and then seeing like MTV videos going over like secular, like Jay-Z and like Alice in Chains and all this like secular music in the world, like demonic music that we think is normal. And it's with it, I knew it was evil because I had this really intense, gross feeling, like really scary, intense feeling like this was wrong. And it was ramping up, like ramping up. And I'm trying to like calm it down, like, what is this? What's going on? And 2 grams for me is like nothing. And like, I've done mushrooms, I've tripped off this batch like a handful of times. So it wasn't like I just got a new batch and these are weird. Like, I've already tested these mushrooms how many times? I went out and partied on them. I've done them at home by myself. I've done more than 2 grams of these. And what is going on? I don't understand. And I started having like all these like secular meanings of like the news, like the media and the news and the politics and like the world agenda. And I'm getting like really, really scared. Like, what's going on? And I have this realization that I sold my soul. Like, I started thinking about like Jimi Hendrix in the 27 Club. And all those people that died at 27, like, oh, they sold their soul for fortune and fame. That's why they all died at that exact age. And that's why they partied so hard, because they knew that there was an end. Like, party it up. I had that realization. I was 23. I had that realization that 23 is your due date. And right when I had that firm realization that time's up, you sold your soul. I had an alarm in my kitchen that was on my microwave, it was on my phone. I don't even know what it was set for. I don't know why there was an alarm set for the middle of the evening on Friday night. It was just beep, 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 beep. And my heart just drops. It's like, because like caught me by surprise. Because like right when that thought hit, the alarm went off. And instantly, I started sinking into my couch. Like my butt just started slowly sinking all the way to the ground. And I couldn't move. I was just sitting there. And I remember the second my butt hit the ground, the floor of my living room, I remember getting sucked down. Just sucked down. And it was like a dirt hole. And I just flew down this hole, and instantly I heard screams, like women's screams and cries, and there's mist and heating mist coming up. For like 2 seconds, there was a drop, and then I'm there like I am now. Like I was sitting on a couch, all of a sudden get sucked down, and I'm completely chained. I'm chained by all fours, my wrist and my ankles, and I'm hung up, like strung up in between a room. It's a pure white room. And it's like me talking to this camera right now. I'm there. It's 100% real. And I remember like feeling pure pain. And when I look at pure pain and terror, and when I looked down, I was completely skinned alive. My whole body was skinned alive. And there's this guy standing there, and he's in a white smock. And he's talking to me in a German accent. And he starts going through my life. And it was right when my parents got divorced. It's like he made me realize this whole time I've been running from this. You've been hiding these feelings. And like burying these feelings. He started talking to me, and he starts showing me my life. He gets through my life of like from parents' divorce to getting into drinking to smoking to drugs to all the terrible things I did while I was in high school all the way till now. I thought I was being righteous, but I just kept going down the same path. And it just made me feel so awful. And I was so scared. I didn't understand where I was. And I remember he told me, after he shows me this, he tells me that I've been here the whole time. He tells me I've been here for centuries. And then I got so used to the torture that they gave me life that I forgot about this, that I've been down here. And they gave me life and they made it all up. He started showing me, like, I remember there was a scene with me and my mom. I was like 3-4 years old, probably 3 years old. And I remember she used to wait on the couch, and she'd like watch TV, and she'd always talk on the phone with one of her sisters and wait for my dad to get home after he's done with work at like 11:30 midnight. And I remember I just lay on her stomach, and and I'd sleep, or she'd like itch my back, and I'd listen to her talk. And when she talked, like you could hear the vibration of her voice in her stomach, and it used to ease me and put me to sleep. And I remember I'm laying on my mom's stomach, and when I looked up, she was a demon. And it really broke my heart. And I remember then a scene with my dad, and I was like in elementary school. We were at my aunt and uncle's cabin with my whole family there. And I found this big leaf, and my cousin, I liked it really bad. I really wanted this leaf, and my cousin was just crying. She wanted it, my younger cousin, and my parents and my mom and her sister got in a fight about it. And I remember running to my dad's Jeep and crying. And my dad was consoling me. Like, he had his arm around my shoulder. He was standing outside the driver's seat, like, consoling me, like, telling me it's going to be all right. And I remember looking up, and he was a demon. His face is all contorted, and he's laughing at me. And they kept going throughout times of my life, like as a child on up, where it was all a lie. Like it was them the whole time. It was all demonic. They tricked me to believe I was there the whole time, that my soul is theirs. I'm in hell. I remember them saying to me, you're going to go back. You're going to go back to your normal life. You're going to go back there for 60 seconds, and then you're going to come back here. And it's going to continue like that. And he explained to me what the time was, like how the time was. Like, it's not going to be normal. Like, you're going to go back there. He's like, but enjoy it. Because it might feel like 5 minutes. It might feel like 10 years. You're coming back here. And you're going to be there until that's going to happen until you die on that world. Then you're coming back here for eternity. And have a torment. And I remember he was standing, and he kept walking around me. He's standing right behind my shoulder. He's like, you're tripping, man. He's like, you're tripping. And I remember it was so creepy. He says, when I get done saying tripping, you're going to understand what eternity in hell is like. I remember him like the creepiest demonic voice. I could still hear it every time I retell this testimony. And he's just like, you're tripping. And he gets to the end of it. And it was like a roller coaster of fear. I remember it took him so long to say it. And I remember in my mind thinking, what's going to happen when he gets to the end of saying it? And the fear was just all encompassing. It was, my heart's just racing. And he's getting up to the top of this. And it feels like we're right when he ended saying tripping. It was like the worst fear I've ever felt in my entire life. It was like train horns going off in my ear. It was terrifying. I remember I was just crying in fear. I was terrified. It was like I could see it. I could see eternity. I could feel eternity of torment in hell. Like no rest, no salvation. And he's like, it's your time to go back. And one of the guys that was there has film of this. I stood up off the couch, and I'm like humming real creepily. There was one point where one of my friends tried to leave, and I like grabbed him by the leg, and I threw him down on the couch. And I get up, and I'm humming real creepily, and I'm standing in front of the TV, and they're like, what are you doing? And I turn off the TV, and I turn around, don't answer, and I sit back down. And they have film of when I came to, and it just was not me. It was I can't watch it anymore because it's so terrifying. But I come to, and I remember they're filming me, and I'm sitting on the ground. I don't know how I got there. They're filming me with their phones, and they're kind of laughing. And I remember behind them was an auditorium of kids our age. And they're all filming me with their lights on. It's all dark, and they're laughing, hundreds of kids. And this demon is standing right next to me in his white smock, and he's looking down at me. And he's going like, you see this? This is your generation. They know what you're going through, and they don't care. They don't love you. And they're just laughing. I can hear them laughing in my head, these demons. He's like, they're all going to hell when they die. He's like, we all got their souls. They forgot about God. I see a vision. And it's of like a cliffside with fire underneath it. All these kids are falling over the cliff into the fire screaming. And this guy's just laughing next to me. He's just laughing. It's too late for them. They won't be saved. I remember going back into the trip. And when I go back to hell, I'm laying on a rock ground in like a cave. It's dark. And I'm naked. And they're I'm in the fetal position, and they're all stabbing me with poles. They're all stabbing me. They're tormenting me. I remember being so tired. I couldn't move. I couldn't say anything. My throat was so dry. And it was so coarse. And I remember just croaking out one thing. I just said, I just need some water. And they were just laughing. They're like, you're never going to drink here. You're never going to get water here. You're never going to sleep. And they just kept tormenting me and tormenting me. And this went on for I don't know how long. I ended up waking up out of it. And I'm getting off the ground. And my friends aren't there. I have complete amnesia. I remember the first thought I had was, my first thought was to go to my room and grab my shotgun and go kill my neighbor. But it wasn't like a thought of like, maybe I'll do this. It was like a real thought of like, I'm going to do this. Like, go grab your shotgun and go kill your neighbor. And I couldn't remember anything. That was my first thought into this world. And I remember I get to my hallway, to my room, and I see my kitchen. And the alarm's still going off on my phone. My friends are nowhere to be found, but I can't remember if they were there or not, or it was all part of the trip. And I walk in and I turn off the alarm and I go to call my ex-girlfriend, who I haven't been with in like a year and a half at this time. And I go to my recents, and it's my now fiance. I had only been dating her for like a week at the time. And it's like 2 a.m. We started this trip at like 6 p.m. It's now 2 a.m. I had no recollection of time. I couldn't understand what happened. I was so confused. I couldn't remember. I remember searching the house. I called her, and I remember the first thing I said to her. She woke up. She's like, hello. And I'm like, is this real? She's like, what? I'm like, are you real? And she just couldn't understand. I just kept pacing, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I have no idea what's going on. And she's like, what? And I couldn't even think of the words to say. Like, literally, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if this is real or not. I couldn't explain what happened. I couldn't put it into words. I was terrified. I remember searching the house for my friends, just like, maybe they're hiding. Maybe this is all a trick. They weren't there. She convinces me to just stay home, and she's going to come pick me up. And she came and picked me up that night, like a half hour later. And I remember just looking in the backseat and seeing her little boy sleeping and just putting my hand on him and like crying. I just like lost it, because I was like, well, this is real. I'm still here. And I'm going to enjoy this. And I was certain that like, I couldn't understand. I'm in hell. My soul's in hell. Like, I never would have thought. It just opened me up to the reality. Like I kept trying to deny it in my head. Like, it was the drugs. But I couldn't wrap my mind around it. Like, how? I've done psychedelics like over 100 times easily. I like know what I'm doing. This is like a microdose to me. I was microdosing mushrooms at work every day in my tea. I got home and told her a little bit of the story, and she was freaked. And it didn't happen until 6 months later. I was so depressed every single day. I almost committed suicide, because I thought I was damned to hell no matter what. I thought I was going to go to hell no matter what. I never called out to God the whole time. I remember it was 6 months later, March, because this happened in March. I didn't give my life to God until September 20th last year. When I got up in the morning to go to work, I couldn't take it anymore. This life didn't make sense. I couldn't. For 6 months, I was in a pure pit of the worst depression I've ever been. You know, I've been in and out of JDC. Mom's kicked me out of my house. Meth addiction, opioid addiction on top of it. An alcoholic, smoking a pack a day, pack and a half a day at times. Always high and inebriated. And this was the most depressed I've ever been in my life. I've never been at a lower point. I remember I got up and I cried to God. I got on my knees at the end of my bed and I cried to God. Like, I'm done. I'm giving my life to you. I'm done with the drugs. I can't do this anymore. I'll give it all up. It was the same prayer I said while I was in JDC the first time. I'll give it all up. I'll quit smoking if you just get me out of this place. I cried that prayer to him. That just saved me. Like, save me. I'll throw away this life. And it was like something left my body. It was like I could feel it. I could feel like this weight come out of my body, this like depression. It just came out of me, and I just felt overflowing of joy fill me. And I got up, and I'm getting injured that morning. I was practicing yoga, and I landed on my shoulder and injured my shoulder, and that's kind of besides the point. But I think it was a conviction from God not to be practicing a satanic thing, yoga, practicing Hinduism. But I found a Bible. I never threw it away from that guy that I thought was crazy. I found this little New Testament that he gave me that I kept under my bed the whole time. It's been there for like 2 years since I worked with them. And I wanted to talk to him. He did deliverance ministry, and he was the only one I knew that I could talk to that would understand me. And I prayed to God. And one day I put on an old pair of jeans that was in my closet, and I'm talking to my girlfriend before work, and I put my hands in my back pocket, and I pull out a piece of paper, and I open it up, and it's all tattered and ripped. And it's the Johnson Monument call log from when I used to work with them. And it had his number on it. And it just like, dude, I couldn't believe it. Like, I really couldn't believe it. And I just texted him that day. I was like, hey, is this you? Is this still your number? And I'm like, I gave my life to God. And he was just so happy. And he happened to move down south, and God called him down there. I called him that day after work, and I told him the story. And he didn't think I was crazy. He knew it was real. He understood that they tricked me. If I would have went and killed my neighbor that night, the cops would have came and I would have gotten a shootout with the cops, and I would have died that night. And I would have went to hell. I would have never gave my life to Jesus Christ. I would have never been saved. The day, September 20th last year, that I cried out and gave my life to Jesus Christ, I was saved. I think that's the greatest thing. That's how holy and graceful God is that he'll take you at any point you are. It doesn't matter how much you've sinned, all the wrongs you've done. When you turn and you give your life to God, when you give your life to Jesus Christ, he loves you all the same. It doesn't matter how bad you are, how good you are. He'll always love you just the same. It never changes. And he filled my heart with joy. He filled me with the Holy Spirit. And I remember instantly getting into the Bible and just surrounding myself. And do you got something to say? Is there something that you'd like to say about it? I remember what a change. I remember the friends. Like, I was surrounded by drug users still, and people that partied, and people that cheated on their girlfriends and would go out every weekend and drink. And I remember I asked God to change my friend group, and he changed it. The people that I met, that I was surrounded by, the Bible study groups that I was praying to. I found a church that I was actually welcomed into, that I felt like, oh man, like all these other churches, like these weren't what's up, man. Like I found a church that welcomed me with open arms, that was really preaching the scripture and not the word of man. I was saved by God on September 20th. It's only been 6 months, and it feels like years. My walk with God, I've seen miracles. Like, I've seen so many healings. I've seen God speak. I can't explain just how much your heart can change. It doesn't matter where you're at, who you are. God will save you just the same. I would have never found God. I spited God. I still worked at Johnson Monument, or not Johnson Monument, the place I work now. And I found a business card. And it was a Christian business card. And I remember going around the warehouse and being like, if I knew I was working for a Christian boss, I would have never took this job. I almost quit. I was like swearing, cussing. I hated Christians. God gave me a trial. He gave me a glimpse of the afterlife, of what it would be like if I never gave my life to Jesus. And I think that the most important thing is love. From Corinthians 1, love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails.
Amen.
Amen.